Welcome to COASTER-net Uncut.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of COASTER-net Uncut. I am Danny Miller from Rochester, New York, hoping to keep the attention of Andy Rybarczyk long enough tonight that we can talk about some roller coasters. We'll have to see. How's it going tonight, Andy?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. You know, I can multitask, so even if my attention wanders maybe one way or the other, that I can still keep focused on the intense debate and discussion that happens only on COASTER-net Uncut. We haven't done that in a while.
Right, and yeah, I know we haven't. And, you know, it seems like we have a common theme going on again as we often do. We often seem to have a theme with our T-shirts here. And
Is it?
So what are we talking about tonight?
I don't know. Is it people who own too many roller coaster T-shirts? Is that our theme tonight? Because I'm beginning to think that's what people think.
Because by that logic, that would be our theme every week.
That's true. That's true. It seems to me that you have a Gatekeeper T-shirt on today, and I have, of course, have the beautiful classic-ish Cedar Point T-shirt that has that classic coaster on it, Raptor. Because when you think like old-time Cedar Point, you just naturally go to Raptor. Absolutely, every time.
Oh, so we're talking about overrated roller coasters where your feet dangle, obviously. No, I love Raptor and love Gatekeeper. And I know you do too. So,
yes.
we're looking at Cedar Point, the roller coaster capital of the world, and specifically, now, this is going to be an interesting show. I think you and I are going to format this one a little bit differently because we talked about this a couple weeks ago, how we were going to talk about the Cedar Point's future. We're coming up to the 150th anniversary in a few years in 2020. And you and I pretty much, to let people behind the curtain a little bit here, every night before when we record this, we usually talk for somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour before, about what we're going to talk about and whatnot. And then after we're done recording, we usually talk for another 30 minutes to an hour, sort of just discussing how we thought it went and then what we want to do the next week. And it seems like since we started this show in September, it really seems like 3 or 4 different times we've talked about Cedar Point and kind of what's going to be next for them. So for you and me, for you and I, it kind of seems like we've done this show like 3 or 4 times already,
Absolutely.
Just off the record. So we're finally going to do it on the record tonight. And I think you were kind of the you were kind of the director and the producer of this show to begin with, because you had this fabulous idea of how Cedar Point's going to do something big for 2020 because that's their 150th anniversary, and that kind of got the cogs turning in our heads about, what are they going to do? And we got 5 years leading up to that now. We have Rougarou and the Hotel Breakers refurb coming in 2015. Then we have 2016, 17, 18, and 19 before the big year in 2020. So tonight is not going to be so much a debate. Like the last couple shows, we've really had good debates and good, I guess, controversial topics. Tonight, I think it's going to be more you and me just throwing our ideas out there. We got some comments from the folks on Facebook and, Twitter and COASTER-net as well, getting their thoughts. We had a pretty funny one, too, that I showed you yesterday that we'll get to that I thought was rather funny. But I think it's going to be more of like an open discussion as opposed to a debate tonight. So why don't you start with what you kind of came to me, back in October when this first kind of came up and we started discussing this. I mean, you were kind of the orchestrator of all that.
Well, it really started back at last year's Winter Chill Out in February, that Tony Clark made this whole presentation about how we weren't to miss next year's Winter Chill Out, which will be the Winter Chill Out that's coming up in, a little, this month in February. that he said, don't miss next year's Winter Chill Out. We're going to have this huge announcement. And it just got my wheels turning a little bit. And that's where I came up with this big idea. And I'm not saying this is a unique idea. Obviously, everyone's kind of assumed that 2020 might be a big year for Cedar Point being the 150th. But I also threw in there the idea of what if they could get 20 coasters by 2020? So their 20th roller coaster would be installed by 2020. And I kind of worked backward from there and started coming up with some ideas of what they could do and make up a feasible 5-year plan. Now, what's also interesting is that over the summer, Tony Clark made it a big point to say that there was a meeting sometime midsummer where the old 5-year plan was thrown out and a new 5-year plan was instituted. So I don't know what that means either. Maybe they liked my idea. I don't know. Maybe they weren't planning on 20 coasters.
Well, that kind of goes back to what we heard when we were at Gatekeeper Media Day. And, the folks from Devin Olson Media, they were doing that wonderful documentary that's up on YouTube. And we remember when Devin was talking to Rob Decker and, VP of planning for Cedar Fair. I think that's something close to his title. I think that's what his title is. And we were talking about how in 2011, I believe, they were sitting at the IAAPA trade show, which we've talked about on this show before, and they were going over their 5-year plan, and CEO Matt Ouimet kind of stopped the meeting and said, we have to come up with something really strong for Cedar Point. So it kind of sounded as if Gatekeeper wasn't in their initial 5-year plan. It was a more... we hear stories about how when Top Fuel Dragster opened, they already had Maverick planned. And they were already in the heavy stages of getting Maverick ready to go. Gatekeeper was more, not so much a last-minute thing, but it certainly wasn't one that was planned 4 or 5 years in advance. It doesn't seem like it. And that would make sense because the Wing Coaster didn't exist 5 years before Gatekeeper opened. So maybe they knew that technology might have been coming, but, so knowing that it's not impossible for things to be updated on the fly, and like you said, it's not entirely impossible for 5-year plans to just get completely thrown out the window, this is kind of the basis for our discussion.
And it's kind of weird because I know we're really rewinding a lot here, but to me, the whole Gatekeeper story... a lot of stuff doesn't fit with me, fit in logically, because let's play that out logically. So Gatekeeper's a last minute thing, and they decide to build Gatekeeper on the fly. Rob Decker, according to the story, finds B&M on the trade show floor. They make the deal right there. Gatekeeper's born. In my mind, Dick Kinzel would not have left the park without a 5-year plan. And in theory, Maverick was built in 2007. So then, Gatekeeper's not built to 2013. And if that was on the fly, I want to know what was the plan. And I find it hard to believe that Kinzel left the park without a major roller coaster expansion, or addition, I should say. In that amount of time, there had to have been something pretty big planned, and that something's got to be coming up soon. So that started getting my wheels turning too. And maybe they've just taken.
Where did that big attraction go?
Exactly, where did it go? So if Gatekeeper truly was a spur of the moment, where's the big coaster? And I find it hard to believe that there wasn't a big coaster in the mix there, because that's Cedar Point, and as Tony Clark likes to say,
6 years.
Yeah, that it's in their DNA. It's in who they are. That's what it is. So the question becomes, where did that coaster go, and how does that fit into the big 2020 plan? Now, I think the best place to start here is probably 2016. And 2016 is this huge question mark. And people think they have it figured out. That we know that the Sandusky Register posted an article a few weeks back that said Cedar Point is pretty much putting in a $15 million dive coaster. And it really took a lot of people by surprise, namely myself, because one, Cedar Point usually doesn't let stuff like that leak very easily, so they're usually a lot tighter on with their lips on that. And two, on the flip side, the Sandusky Register usually doesn't report things that aren't pretty confirmed. Like they have a very good working relationship with the park, and for them to print something, they would have to have something on strong authority. Because if you remember,
they have some sort of strong information.
Yeah, they printed the whole gatekeeper layout weeks before it actually was released, and it wasn't a perfect layout. It just showed you basically where it was going to travel in the park, and it was accurate. So they do have a history of posting early reports. That's not unusual. The unusual part is it being this early, and the unusual part is a lot of people are questioning it. That we just had another story come out that we posted earlier this week on COASTER-net, where the the publisher of Amusement Today basically came out and said, no, it's going to be a dark ride, that he's read the reports of the dive coaster, and that he doesn't believe it. Yeah, he doesn't buy it. It's going to be a dark ride. Now, the reasoning for why he doesn't buy it isn't all that strong, because he says, well, it's not big enough for the space they have. And for some reason, he completely discounts the fact that you have a huge area right next door of two, an antique cars and a turnpike cars, that you could take either one of those out and drop half the coaster right there and have more than enough space for a dive coaster. It's still going to be a little tight, but I don't think it's impossible to do. It's definitely possible to do. So it's just, and then the other thing is the dive coaster just seems like, I know they're working with B&M across the chain, but the dive coaster just seems like such an odd choice for a number of reasons.
You think so?
I do, and this is why. I think it's an odd choice because it's a model that's fairly older. It's an odd choice because there are two other dive coasters being installed very soon. You have Oblivion at Gardaland, I believe, isn't it? At Gardaland they're doing it, Oblivion. And
Gardaland is theirs is called Oblivion, the Black Hole, and then over at Effling you have Baron 1898.
Exactly. So you have two other dive coasters being installed. Oh, of course, overseas in Europe. And I guess you could make the argument on both sides of that equation, saying, well, they are making two more. It would make sense for Cedar Point to jump on board and get theirs. It's going to be the tallest of them in theory. It's going to be the fastest, blah, 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 blah. So maybe B&M's going to, just go on a dive coaster kick here and make three at a time and not have to really change a major setup. I don't know. But it just doesn't really. I never thought a dive coaster would be the way that Cedar Point would go, in short. Like, I know we joke around because our buddy Stephen Lynn has been predicting Dark Ride for at least 2 solid years now. So,
Monday morning executive of VP planning quarterback.
Yes. So Stephen Lynn has been predicting Dark Ride for a while. Now he's all on board the dive coaster thing. He loves the idea. But it just seems like with their relationship with Triotech and them building one at Canada, I was kind of surprised not to see it this year. It went to Knott's Berry. Like, it's like this waiting game of when it's actually going to happen. Now, there's another theory out there. Okay, so let's scratch all that off. And this is one that I haven't even told you yet. But there is another theory out there that says it's neither a dive coaster nor a dark ride, but in fact, it's going to be a huge installation, a huge roller coaster, because there's writing on the wall currently that says that other parks are going to try and break the height record, that we already know about the Polar Coaster going down in Orlando. What if Cedar Point tried to jump the gun on it, knowing, and maybe this is where the 5-year plan changed. They decided to jump the gun on it and move up their 450-foot roller coaster up to next year and try to jump and be the first one to break the height record. And then that way, when the polar coaster does it, you can't ever take that away from, if they do 500 feet, they can't take that away from Cedar Point. It's going to be the first 500-foot coaster, just like Millennium Force is the first 300-foot coaster. So, and actually, with the amount of clearing going on at Cedar Point right now, that's the only thing that confuses me. And I know I'm talking a lot here, but there's a ton of clearing. It's the IMAX theater being cleared. It's the turnpike cars. There looks like some work's going on over there. If you looked at the webcams recently, you'll notice that Calypso is strangely missing. Now, you can attribute all of this to a dive coaster, but my question is why are you doing it so soon? Why does a dive coaster require this amount of clearing this early in the season? For heaven's sakes, they built Fury.
Especially if it's B&M, considering how fast they go up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
They built Fury in record speed. The thing's up already for all intents and purposes. It's not even going to be open for another month.
Thunderbird was done in November.
Exactly. So I don't get why we have all this clearing going on right now. In 2015, at the early stages of 2015, you're knocking down the theater. You're possibly taking out Calypso, maybe relocating it. I don't know. Why are you doing all of this now? It doesn't make sense for a dive coaster, and it doesn't make sense for a dark ride either. So I'm befuddled.
No, definitely not a dark ride.
Yeah, I'm just absolutely befuddled at the amount of work being put into this park this off season, especially given all this other stuff that's going on. And you said it when we did the Rougarou episode. Why have all that work being done on Rougarou so early in the season too? Well, it's because they had all these other things to do, obviously, that they didn't have time to paint Rougarou because they were knocking down buildings, relocating flat rides, doing all this other stuff. But the question is out there, why are they doing it now? It would imply that they're going to start work on something huge early on in the season. And like I said, that's pure speculation. I have nothing to go on based on other than what I see on a webcam, but it just doesn't make sense to me of why you're clearing so much area so early in the season. I don't get it.
Yeah, the dots are not quite connecting yet. Typically when you see, you look at how the go-karts at Carowinds came out like at the beginning of last year, and then they started, you can start to see the makings of footers, but Fury is a big coaster.
It's huge.
It's 6,600 feet long. It's the longest steel coaster in the United States, I think, or something along those lines, or one of the longest steel coasters in the United States. And it's like, well, geez, they announced that thing in August, and then they didn't even really start construction on putting track up until September. The thing's done already. You're talking about it's January. By the time this goes live, it's February. But we're recording on January 29th. Tomorrow, they're putting the last piece of track in. So by the time you're watching this, the track's complete. Thunderbird, they announced in late July because they said, they went backwards on their construction timeline and said, okay, this is when steel is going to first arrive at the park, so we need to announce it before this date. They announced it on July 24th. The thing's done before Thanksgiving. Come on now. Now, obviously, that's a smaller coaster. Lengthwise, it's about the same as what this dive coaster would be. See, here's why the dive coaster makes some sense to me. Because I wrote down today, I was thinking about this today. This is one of the first shows where I actually sat down and thought about it way in advance, prior to a couple hours. But today, I was sitting down between classes and thinking about this. And I wrote down what the park has. And they have a floorless coaster with Rougarou now. They have an inverted coaster. They have a wing coaster. You have a Hyper, a Giga, a Strata coaster. You have 2 wooden coasters for now. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then I wrote down what's missing. Well, they don't have a dive coaster. They don't have a flying coaster. They don't have a real up-to-date wooden coaster. And I think we're gonna touch on Mean Streak a little bit, but if we get into, a possible Rocky Mountain conversion, because RMC has said that there are projects in the United States outside of the Six Flags chains coming for 2016 and beyond. So we do know that that's happening. We don't know where, but we do know that those are coming. And then I also wrote down they don't have like a dark coaster or a themed coaster like they did with Disaster Transport. They don't have something like that now, really. So those are kind of like the four things that I wrote down. Yeah, you could say family coaster, but I mean between Gemini, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, Junior Gemini, Woodstocks Express, and then I mean if you're counting Pipe Scream as a roller coaster, then that's not a bad lineup of family roller coasters to have. I mean, you could make the argument about Blue Streak, too. It's kind of like the first big roller coaster that a lot of people ride in that area. I would think that's kind of like the stepping stone between, and that's where I think they missed Wildcat a little bit, because I think Wildcat was really the best example of what they had there. So I think that was a good transition coaster. But so a dive coaster is something that it's one of those major types of roller coasters that you would think a park like Cedar Point ought to have, that they don't. Now, you could say, okay, maybe a 4D coaster, but those aren't all that common, and I don't know. It's like those are almost too rare. The dive coaster, I mean, we have... If you're talking about the S&S 4D coasters, then we have one in the States. We're getting a second, which is a little different down in Texas. But you can't go really big with that because it's not a controlled spin. It's like the Intamin Zack spins. You can't go very big with those because they're free spinning. You can't have a lot of speed. It would get too out of control. So I think let me tell you what I wrote down here. And I think these are kind of the 5 big things that when you and I have talked about this, we're talking about Rougarou for 2015 and a Hotel Breakers refurbishment. From 2016 through 2019, that's 4 years. I have these things written down here.
Hold on one second.
2016.
Yeah. I think we should also add that when we do talk about this, we're not just fanboying it up either. We're actually looking at numbers and price, and when you actually start breaking it down, and I think we should mention that as well as we move on. That when you start breaking it down, it's not out of the realm of possibility what we're talking about. The things that we're talking about are not super expensive, and when you look at money being transferred back and forth and saving here and then being able to spend a little bit more there, it kind of all works out over the 5 years, which, I think we'll see as we move on here too.
Right. We've done, like I said, it feels like we've done this show 3 or 4 times, so we kind of skipped over that. But we have done our homework based on what we've seen Cedar Point invest in the past in a single year and over the course of several years, over the course of 5-year periods, especially around the turn of the century when it seemed like they were plopping in coasters every other year. We know that they're not afraid to do that. We've also looked at what some other rides similar to what we're talking about have cost in the past and what we can estimate them to cost now. So I'll read off the 4 things that I kind of have written down here for 2016 through 2019 with the assumption that 2020 is some sort of large roller coaster that would either be something they don't have, some sort of world record breaker, or maybe it's some kind of new technology altogether and it's like a world's first, like when the Wing Coaster, the 4D coaster came out. It's something brand new that we right now sitting here do not know exists yet. Who knows? And maybe that gets them to the 20 coaster mark. So when we're talking about 4 years, Rougarou still is only 17 because the park is counting Pipe Screams. So by their count, they have 17 roller coasters. That means in these 4 years, we need to add 2 so we have the possibility of getting to 20 in 2020 if there's not 2 added. So I think next year, 2016, we're looking at a new roller coaster of some sort. I think it seems like we might be going that route. Now, we've addressed the dive coaster rumor. We've talked about the dark ride a little bit. It's not going to be those two things combined. We know that. But maybe it is like a Wonder Mountains Guardian where it's a dark ride and a coaster. It's like a pseudo coaster. But again, why would that require so much work? I don't know. This early on anyway.
Yeah.
Unless they're putting in a lot of other rides. But see, now, excuse me while I do some searching here. Go ahead while I'm searching for a few things here.
And as you're doing that, the other thing we do know that has basically been confirmed by the park in so many words is that the old dorms standing next to the marina, or really on the marina for that what's known as the Gold's dorms, I believe, those are not leaving this summer. They are leaving next off season. So they will be standing for all of this season and then being torn down during the 2016 off season. During the 2015-2016 off season. So that opens up a little bit bigger tract of land. So once again, if you were doing something big, you would begin the groundwork for this in the season of 2015. And then the actual construction would happen, and those dorms would be gone. And you could continue construction in that area and have a lot more space. Now, once again, you can go back and say, well, maybe they're using it for the dive coaster. I don't know. I don't know, but let's get back to your research here, because I just want to throw that in there too, that we do know that the space might be a little bit bigger.
It's good point. Good point. So if we're to let's just assume at some point in these 4 years we get some sort of Triotech dark ride roller coaster type thing. I think. Would you say it's safe to think that if they did a Triotech thing at Cedar Point, they would want it to count as a roller coaster?
Yeah,
because they did it at Canada's Wonderland, and then at Knott's Berry Farm, it's not going to be a roller coaster. But it seems like Cedar Point would have to have a coaster part to it. It would seem like that would be the way that they would go.
Especially since they've already done it as a coaster once. I think a lot of people might be a little bit offended if it didn't have that little element on the front of it or anywhere in it. Maybe even make it more of a coaster. Than even
have like an arena portion of it.
Absolutely, and you could do a lot of stuff with it. With being all screens and everything. Why not make it into more of a roller coaster and dark ride? There might be an argument against what's the height restriction on Wonder Mountain? Is it very high? It's probably not as
the
big
height of the lift hill.
No,
is
I'm talking
60
about for people. Like how tall do you have to be to get on it? Is it like 40?
I think it's a 48. I think it's 48. I don't remember off the top of my head.
48 would put it in line, because Cedar Point raised Iron Dragon this year to 48. So all of their roller coasters, the tallest or the minimum height that you have to have is 48 inches to ride a roller coaster, or a big roller coaster. Obviously, Woodstock and Junior Gemini have their own rules, but even your adult coasters, they all have a 48 height limit on them. So I don't know if that prevents more people from riding. I don't know, but in general, I think it's going to be a coaster. That is my long-winded response to yes.
So Wonder Mountains Guardian, we're looking at Wonder Mountains Guardian, $10 million US.
Mm-hmm.
So if they do something a little bigger, a little longer, maybe a bit more coaster, and maybe they sneak a few surprises in there, maybe 12 to 15 million. I think that's probably safe. The thing about Cedar Point is you don't have to go in and do all the excavation inside the mountain already.
Yeah.
So they have so they would have to build a structure, which, depending on how in depth they want to go with it and how immersive they want to go with it, maybe they just want to build a box and put the ride inside. But if they wanted to do some sort of immersive theming to it on the outside, then they would have to. Obviously, that price tag goes up. I don't know if it would cost more to just build a box than it would to actually dig through the mountain. They did a lot of work on that mountain. They had to do a lot of work on the inside to get it to work. But
and if I'm correct to assume, we don't know what Journey to the Iron Voyage or whatever they call it was it Voyage to the Iron Reef? We haven't seen anything
Voyage
about
to the Iron Reef.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything about the building yet.
I haven't seen a whole lot on it yet. So did they announce a cost for that either? I didn't see a cost figure for that.
No, I have not either. The only thing they just announced, they did a new teaser trailer, and they just announced it's going to open up May 15th, with a media day of May 13th. So. They just announced that part of it, and that's all we know. Like we've seen images from it, we've seen video from it, but we have no idea what this thing's gonna look like. And it's mind-boggling to me because we have no concept of what this thing's gonna look like right now. And I think once we do see it, I think we'll get a better idea for what Cedar Point when they eventually and they're gonna do it. Like, come on, to sit here and think that they're not going to install a dark ride is kind of silly. They're going to install one at some point, whether it be within the next 5 years or in the next 10 years. It's gonna happen. So it'll be interesting to see what Knott's does with it on the outside, to see because I think what Knott's is going to do with it is pretty much going to be the standard bearer for how the other parks are going to deal with it as well.
Yeah, I think so. So let's assume that dark ride becomes one of our coasters. Yeah. Okay, we have possibly a dive coaster, and we possibly have a dark ride coaster. That would be 2 roller coasters. Okay, and so we've got 2 roller coasters in there in that 4-year span: 2016, 17, 18, 19. Let's say 20.
That already sets you up for having
20. Right, that sets you up fine. Now, the question is, what order do they come in? Something big has to be coming up there in 2016 for them to be. Now, the other thing we have to touch on, I think, is the whole Mean Street topic, because that seemed to be a popular thing, and I was told by an employee, they said, keep an eye on Mean Street for 2016. That's all they said to me. But when you think about it, okay, so let's say we're going, we know the dive coaster, if done, is $15 million. That was the figure?
That's
right.
Which a lot of people questioned, because they said, well, SheiKra and Griffin were sitting at about 12 and 13. You're making this a lot taller. You're making it a lot faster. You take into account inflation. And the best response people could come up with was essentially a B&M discount for all the business that Cedar Fair has given them over the last few years. And I
don't undervalue that. Don't undervalue that. I think that's a very real possibility. That's how business works. I honestly believe that that's a realistic possibility.
But I don't know. It's just something doesn't jive with me with the whole dive coasters thing. I don't know.
Okay. So Leviathan, Canada's Wonderland, $28 million dollars. Okay, it's a longer ride. It's a bigger ride. It's faster. Now I'm going to look at Banshee, and this is where our math is coming. Banshee, $24 million. Mm-hmm. Okay. And, Banshee's a big ride. It's a tall ride. It's a long ride. The dive coaster isn't going to be as long as Banshee. It's going to be a little bit taller. But the thing you have to think about is if you have vertical drops, you're saving a lot of space. And you're saving on some support structures, too, because you're going straight down. So, and the lift hill is steep. So I think people are underestimating, or I think maybe they're overestimating how much land you actually need for a dive coaster. You look at SheiKra's footprint, aside from where the water splash is, SheiKra is on a very small plot of land. And Griffin is the same way. When you talk about Griffin is 3,108 feet long. So you're not talking about being a whole lot longer than Griffin. They're just going to pack in a few inversions it seems like maybe instead of a water splash, you're going to have a couple more inversions. We heard that there's going to be 2 Immelmans, if there's a dive coaster, inline roll, which could easily take the place of a water splash, and then one other surprise element that we didn't quite know what it was going to be, I think, at this point.
They also threw in a tunnel, too, that if you look at, like, Oblivion over at Alton Towers, or, was it Kraka over in Europe as well?
Krake, yeah.
Krake, that they both have these tunnels that would be unique for America, because SheiKra kind of has the tunnel, but it's not the same.
The second, well, but here's the thing, SheiKra, I could see Cedar Point doing something exactly like SheiKra, where maybe the first drop, or even if there's a second drop, keep in mind, maybe they don't have a mid-course on it. I don't know. Maybe they don't have a mid-course on it, and maybe that saves you some space.
But they might need it for for capacity, though.
They may. They may. So
unless they go the Banshee route, they could go the Banshee route and having the super long brake run at the end too. That saved Banshee's cap.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe I don't know. But I could see the first drop going into a tunnel like SheiKra, where it's not that far underground. It's not that big. I mean, that's not going to cost a ton of money to do that. It's going to cost some money. Yeah, maybe the $15 million is just the ride itself. I don't know. Griffin was 15.6. So if they got a discount from B&M because they're doing so many, it's not inconceivable that a ride of this size they could call it $15 million. And maybe that doesn't include some of the, excavate. I don't know. Maybe that's the ride. That's how much they're paying B&M for it. That may not be how much putting in the ride is going to cost. So now I'm going to bring up another topic here because we started getting into the mean streak thing a little bit. Let's talk about New Texas Giant. New Texas Giant in 2011 cost Six Flags $10 million. Now, and this is a discussion you and I had a while back, Gatekeeper and the front gate refurb altogether was $30 million. It's not out of the question in my mind that I could see them going with a Triotech Dark Ride for $10 to $12 million and redoing Mean Streak in the same year for $10 or $12 million because it's a little bigger than Texas Giant. It's got almost an identical layout, flipped. It's got a very similar layout. I could see a New Texas Giant type refurb on Mean Street costing them $12 to $13 million, and I could see a slightly souped up Wonder Mountains Guardian costing them $12 or $13 million. That's $25 million, and they sunk all of that into 1 year with Gatekeeper, and they're sinking a lot of money into this year with Rougarou and Hotel Breakers, the refurb, and that's not even a ride. They're not even getting anything new, really. They're putting new trains on.
Now keep in mind too that the when the deal was done, it was said that they sold the Soak City Water Park in San Diego to SeaWorld, it became Aquatica eventually, I believe. When they sold that water park, that money was earmarked to pay for the hotel renovations. So you could actually make the argument that 2015 is almost free of charge right now. That whatever the cost of the paint and the cost of the train was is actually the cost of money that you're investing in the park for 2015. That you could almost say that was a wash.
Yeah, and the cost to redo the station, which quite honestly is not that big. But we're not gaining a roller coaster this year. We're still at 17 because you're losing Mantis, gaining Ruger. It's you're not gaining a roller coaster there. And Mean Streak would be the same way. If you redo Mean Streak, you don't gain a roller coaster out of that. You don't lose one either. You're just redoing one, like what they're doing with Rougarou. So let's say a dive coaster is 15. I don't see them doing a dive coaster and a Mean Streak type thing in the same year. I think they're too much of headliners. But I could see them doing maybe a dark ride coaster and a Mean Streak redo or something in the same year, or even in back-to-back years. Mm-hmm. So let's for a minute say that those are 3 different years. Let's say we get a dive coaster in 2016. Let's say they go with a dark ride coaster from Triotech in 2017, and then let's say either in 2018 or 2019 we see a Mean Streak redo. You could argue about what order those come in,
Yeah.
but let's just say 3 of those 4 years are those 3 things. A lot of people are talking about a water park expansion. Maybe they do that for a year, just the focus is away from the park since they're putting a lot of money into the roller coasters. Maybe they do a water park expansion and a flat ride. I don't know if I would see them just doing a water park expansion. Maybe a water park expansion comes in with something like a Texas Giant refurb since it's only maybe 10 or 12 million, or a Triotech thing where it seems like, if there's going to be a lot of years of heavy spending, if a water park expansion comes in with like a Triotech ride and you get $20 million altogether for that year, then you take a year off, maybe you put in a flat ride, you put in, something unique in the flat ride department or something new, or maybe you just take a year off and do some show refurbs. I mean, there's things you could talk about, what kind of flat rides don't they have, or...
The one thing is with the water park expansion, the reason why that's been brought up a lot is that there's been heavy rumors that Challenge Park was going bye-bye. That
Right.
the mini golf course is usually not well attended. It's taking up space. They said that could go away. It also lends credence to that because when they're doing this hotel renovation, there was a whole section of the hotel breakers called the Bonaire section that was next to the tower that has been demolished, and from all renderings, there's no intention of bringing that back right now. I don't know if 5-10 years in the future they're going to build another section of the hotel, but right now that's gone. So technically, you could expand the water park out into the mini golf course if you tore that out and still have enough space between the hotel and the water park as to not really disturb guests there. Now, the other thing that people have said is that you could be tearing out the other side of Challenge Park with the go-karts, the skyscraper flat ride, and the ripcord sky coaster, that you could be taking all 3 of those out and expanding the water park that way. I don't know. I felt a lot stronger about that earlier this year, where at Coaster Mania, a lot of people mentioned that there was obvious spray paint markings over by the front of the park with the point pavilions. People said, well, they're going to take out the point pavilions and put in the sky coaster up at the front of the park to match the success of Slingshot. That Slingshot's inside the park,
Right.
And it has a lot more people on it. So if you move the sky coaster inside the park, you probably get more ridership on it, more money that way. But from what I've heard from other websites, they're just redoing the point pavilions right now. That they're going to refurb them and have them be all new. So that theory doesn't really pan out with what's actually happening. So I'm sure there will be a water park expansion. I don't know how large it's going to be. The running theory's always been that the water park is not huge on the park's list. It's not like a water park at, say, Valley Fair or even Kings Island or Michigan's Adventure,
or like a Holiday World or Dorney Park.
Yeah. Because it's a separate ticketed park. It's mainly viewed as a park for hotel guests and a park for platinum pass holders to go escape the park a little bit. That it's not really this place that people are lining up to buy tickets to every day. It's not that. And I don't know if you want it to be that. I don't know if that's what they're pushing for. And to be honest, I don't think a water park expansion is going to have the return on an investment that you would probably hope it would. That, you put in a new coaster, or you put in a flat ride, you basically do anything in the park, and it's probably going to have a much better return on investment than any water park expansion will, just because you're not drawing those people. That people going to a water park, they're kind of accustomed to having it for free now, to be honest, especially in Ohio, that you have Kings Island and basically all the other Cedar Fair parks are pretty much, free with your ticket. But that's been another statement. Maybe they change that. Maybe they make the water park part of the admission price. That's a theory out there too.
Raise the admission price.
I don't know, because now you're charging everyone a little bit more to go to a water park if they use it or they don't use it. I don't know. But I do think you'll see something there. But like you said, I think it's very likely that that water park expansion might be coupled with something else going on in the park, kind of like we saw with Dragster H2O being installed.
Sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to kind of break this up here, I want to read some of the comments. We didn't have quite as many comments as we did for the Great Coaster Show, but I did want to read through some comments because I think it's going to lead us into something that I also want to bring up, because you had mentioned it in one of our earlier discussions about a month ago. David wrote in on the Steel Coaster Connoisseur page, and he said if the rumors are true, Cedar Point gets a dive coaster in 2016. Here are his predictions for the following 4 years. He says 2017, he thinks you're getting a water park expansion, which we just touched on. 2018, some sort of high thrill flat ride. And that's something you and I talked about. There are a lot of types of flat rides that they don't have there. It's just a matter of how unique and how readily available they are. Mondial has a lot of strange little flat rides that they have up at Canada's Wonderland that Cedar Point doesn't have anything like a Top Scan. So maybe something like that. 2019, he says some sort of family flat ride. And then 2020, he says a GCI wooden coaster. And I think that's an okay list. The only issue with that then is you're not hitting the 20 coasters. And again, that's something that you came up with kind of on your own, but I think that's something that you and I think that there might be some legs to that theory, just because we know Cedar Point likes, or Cedar Fair likes numbers. I think Voyage to the Iron Reef is opening on 5/15/15, so it's 5/1/5/1/5. I don't know if there's any correlation to that. Fury 325, we're learning Media Day is going to be on March 25th, so it's 3/25 on the calendar. So, Cedar Fair has enjoyed playing little cutesy games like that. So it would be, if 2020 is the 150th anniversary, then you could see them doing some sort of marketing ploy all off season where it's Cedar Point gets to 20 in 2020. I could see them doing something like, or number 20 in 2020 or something, and it's a hashtag on its own right there.
Well, the other thing interesting about that rumor, and about his post is the concept of this wooden coaster, a new wooden coaster.
Yes.
And you mentioned earlier in the show, what is the glaring area that Cedar Point is missing? And I think the glaring area is, and maybe it's not, maybe you count Blue Streak as this, but it's your family wood coaster that packs a little punch. And you see things out there like Wooden Warrior at Quasi. You see things like Rorosaurus at Storybookland. And you begin to think, you begin to think that, well, is it that out of the realm of possibility that they could build one of those at Cedar Point, to bridge that gap, that you would have that stepping stone, once again to move on to the bigger coasters. And to be honest with you, I've always said the perfect place for that would be to expand Planet Snoopy, especially out onto the Wicked Twister Midway, because that Midway is very wide. It's huge. Plus, you have where Chaos used to be in the Swashbuckler before that. You have two kiosks for food. And then you have pieces of Kitty Kingdom. Like, there's like a kid's bumper cars over there. There's the Sir Rub-a-Dub's tubs that I think you could easily start removing things and be able to build a family wood coaster there and have it shoot down that midway and then come back and be able to fit it right in there. I don't think it's not, and maybe it's not even a family wood coaster. Maybe you look at something like a pandemonium type spinning ride, because that's another glaring area that they don't have. They don't have a spinning roller coaster. So maybe you add in like a Gerstlauer, pandemonium, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility either. So you have all these options here of things that you could do. And it's just, I just think that the possibilities are endless once you start thinking about these things. And to keep in mind, when we first concocted this, in my mind, a dive coaster wasn't even in the realm of possibility. I was counting to 20 with your dark ride and with, a family wood GCI or something, or not GCI, but
we didn't even mention dive coaster.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be more something along the lines of Gravity Group or something like that. But yeah, I just think that your possibilities are really, really endless at this point as to what can actually happen in the next 5 years. And I think once 2016 falls into place, and I kind of said this about 2015 too, so I said once 2015 falls into place, things will be clearer. And it didn't end up that way because we got Rougarou, which really muddied the waters so much. I was as shocked as anybody when they announced Rougarou. I was probably the most shocked. I had written a blog the week before saying that Rougarou I thought was like the worst thing that they could do out of all the possibilities of what they could do. But they went with it. Okay, it's going to improve the ride. And I think it should also be stated that when you look at these 20 coasters, if they actually build them what they're talking about, if you talk about the dive coaster, if you talk about redoing Mean Streak, my God, can you imagine that lineup of coasters? That you could literally have Maverick, Millennium, you go down the list, and then you fix Mantis.
Magnum, Dragster, Raptor, Gatekeeper. They fix Mantis. You get an RMC in there. I mean, Magic Mountain fans would have nothing on that. I don't think they do anyway, but
I honestly, people say, we've had this debate. I'm not a fan of New Texas Giant, but people say New Texas Giant is a top 5 roller coaster. You say it's a top 10 roller coaster. You take Mean Streak. You take Mean Streak, which is one of the glaring problems in their lineup that people perennially hate that ride, and you take a hated, despised ride and make it into a top 5 roller coaster in the world. And you've done something special there. You have a coaster lineup that no park in the world will be able to touch ever, ever, ever. And I think you already have that. No. But I'm just saying now you're just making it. I agree. You're making it untouchable for the rest of eternity.
Well, and I wanted to bring up the family wooden coaster a little bit because that's something that you and I had thought a while back, and we had said, well, Cedar Fair isn't big on the wood coaster right now. I mean, they had that deal with GCI, and that ran its course, and now we haven't really seen a whole lot. We haven't seen Gravity Group come in there. We haven't seen RMC in the Cedar Fair parks yet. Maybe that changes in the next year or two. So I knew it was going to be interesting to post this question in the Wood Coaster Connoisseurs page, and that's actually where we got the most activity, which is interesting. Our buddy Kane wrote in. I think he's jerking with us a little bit. He said, "Put in more 3-point challenges in games, also less parking spots and more Starbucks." So that was fun. We had a couple of jokesters here in this thread. We got one at the end, which is going to be good. Now Darren says that he doesn't think that a ride will be added in 2020. He said, looking back in the parks past, they've made an anniversary celebrations their own attractions. He said it may be different under We Met, though. If a new coaster comes in 2016, then it would seem like 2020 would be a logical year for the next one. But as you and I said, unless they're going something small in between there, you're not getting the 20 coasters in 2020. And that's assuming you're not taking anything out. So I don't know. Cheryl also said something. She said, "How about for their 150th anniversary, they restore Geauga Lake and bring it back?" Oh, yeah. Mark said he doesn't think that wood coasters are coming because he thinks the park has kind of forgotten its history along the way. So he doesn't expect anything from that front. So and then the last one we had here, which I thought was just genius. It's a long post, but I'm going to read the whole thing for comic relief here. As much as we try and provide some of the comic relief, I think this was just great. Alan wrote in here and he said they should make the first combined wood and steel coaster. At this point, I was intrigued. Said make it a Mobius coaster with half the track wood, half steel. Trains can do it now. No one has done it yet. And this makes sense because RMC has trains. They're the same trains that run on steel and wood. So you can do it. He said, make it Snoopy versus the Red Baron interactive dark ride coaster, like what Canada's Wonderland and Knott's have done. More indoor rides, dark rides, and dark rides. Attractions, performances. Did I say dark rides? Finally, add in 3 at one time, a small kiddie family or very compact coaster all at once to take over the coaster count lead. If they don't plan to go that route, then start advertising that they are the number one coaster park as they have the most track, continuing to increase the world record that they were the previous holder. He said not to remove any family rides, flat rides, or shows, just to screw their fan base because they're trying to bring in folks from out of the region. So think of your local fans first. We still want the turnpike ride and the old-time cars. Build the coasters on top of them like other parks do. And I think, side note, look at Gronelund over in Sweden. Yeah. If you want if you think that Cedar Point doesn't have room, go look at Gronelund or Indiana Beach because those are parks that have no room and they find places to put coasters.
He
said bring back the small-sized.
I was going to say, in fairness, they're really ugly parks, though. Like, they're hideous. They're ugly parks.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that's true. So, I mean, take that for what you wanted to. Said bring back the small-sized water ride, the log flume rides, and not yet another large-scale water ride that is redundant with what you have. He said, and then in quote parentheses, he says, "Stupid shoot the rapids that nobody rides." And then he asked, "Please post a follow-up when your stuff is here to watch. Thanks. Right on." Well, so I thought that was an excellent post, beginning with the Snoopy versus the Red Baron Steelwood Mobius racing coaster. Yes. Problem is that only counts as one towards the count.
Yeah, well. For some. Here's he did say an interesting point. And what's funny is his sentiments are echoed in many places, and many people are beginning to get down on the park that if you read the Sandusky Register article about the proposed dive coaster, a lot of the comments underneath it said you're taking out way too many family rides, that you start looking down the list of family rides they've removed in the last 5 years, and you can start with things like Paddle Wheel Excursion, Disaster Transport, Wildcat, just the flat rides have been disappearing over the years, Swatch and Binge or Chaos, possibly other things coming up in the next year. Like we said we didn't see Calypso on the webcams. That could be another one that's gone. The shows are leaving.
But we added the flyers and Pipe Scream, so I mean you got that.
Yeah, you know what though? It's just subtract. But see, here's the problem, and this is a theory that I kind of agree with on some level. That you look at a ride like Paddle Wheel Excursion, and there's a difference between adding rides and adding family rides and adding rides that families can do together. Paddle Wheel Excursion is a ride that everyone can go on. Your mom can go on it, your grandma can go on it, your grandpa can go on it. Everyone can go on the ride. That you can experience that together. You can go to the show, the Snoopy on Ice show at the Good Time Theater. Everyone can experience that together. These are the things that they're removing. and they're adding in something like Pipe Scream that a lot of people think it's too intense, even for kids. That there are my dad won't ride it. Even my good friend John, he hates the ride because it spins too much. That's not a ride that appeals to a lot of people. And the flyers, I'm sorry, I don't get flyers. I just don't. I find them to be incredibly boring.
Come on. You haven't ridden the good kinds of flyers then.
But then if you ride I've seen the good kinds of flyers, and those are hardly things I'd want to put my grandma on. Like, come on.
Well, I'll agree with that. I wouldn't want to put my grandmother on those either. I mean, those especially when you get a good set of them that really lets you whip them around like the Knoebels. Yeah. The Carowinds ones are pretty. The Carowinds ones are pretty good, but the Knoebels and the Kennywood ones are the two. I believe Kennywood. At their event they have every year at KennyCon, I believe they actually give a half an hour of ERT on the flyers, just so acers can try a cable snap.
Here's a secret, too, that I know you haven't been to this place, but, owned in the same chain as Kennywood is Idlewild, and they have a set of flyers there that look very similar to the ones at Knoebels and Kennywood, and they have big signs all over the place, don't snap your flyers. So if you post big signs like that, it kind of makes me think that you can snap your flyers if you really wanted to. So maybe.
Well, that goes back to my theory. I talk about this all the time. I call it my log flume theory from back my days at working at Dorney Park. And my theory is nothing makes people want to do something more than being told they can't do it. And I think anybody would agree with that. I'm sure I'm not the first one to say that. But this I call it the log flume theory because pretty much on every log flume, including the one at Dorney, Thunder Creek Mountain, as you leave the station, there's a sign that says, "Please do not rock the boat." 9 out of 10 idiots on this earth would not think to rock the boat until they see the sign that says, "Do not rock the boat." And the next thing you know, you got boats upside down and you got people drowning in 8 inches of water. Like, you know what? Good riddance. You deserve that one. Come on now.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
So, okay.
People.
All right. So it's uncut. So
Hey, let's do it formally. It's uncut. No, that's not good. It's uncut.
Wait, hold on. Pinky up.
Pinky, get out of here.
It's uncut.
Oh, God. Will you be serious? to quote Gorilla Monsoon.
Aye. So, it's interesting. There's a lot of different things that we could see happening here. And I had some, maybe to kind of wrap things up here as we get close to the end of our time here tonight. I had some other thoughts here. And we talked about the family wood coaster. Would they go the route of a family wood coaster? I don't know that I could see them doing a family. I think if they go wood coaster, I think they're going to go at least 80, 90 feet like a GCI. I don't see them going like 40 or 50 feet.
Here's my problem with the GCI. The GCI takes an incredible amount of space that I just don't think they have. I know they have space, but they have space in moderation in different areas. That to get a large tract of land, you got to start doing some pretty innovative stuff that I just don't see them doing. I'm not saying
move a lot of stuff around.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they can't. Okay, let's say you take out the dinosaurs on Millennium Island and you take out Iron Dragon and you put in a GCI. Yeah, it can be done, but man, you're taking out, one of the last Aero Suspendeds. I don't think the dinosaurs are going to be there forever, so I could see that. You could fill in the lagoon. You could do a lot things, but you're doing a lot of things.
I think the dinosaurs are going pretty soon. Because the Kings Island ones are in some. I mean, they added some, but I hear those aren't in good shape.
No, they're not. I was very disappointed.
Even the Dorney ones are only a couple years old, and those are starting to lag a little bit. So I think I think. Not to make a bad pun here, but I think the time on the dinosaurs is ticking. So I don't know. That opens up some space there too.
But and then the other thing is how willing is Cedar Fair in general to start working with new companies? That we see them working a lot with B&M now. but and we don't see any talk at all of Intamin coming back. Like I just don't see that happening. So the question is who becomes this next company to work with? Is it SNS? Is it RMC? Is it a company like Mac? I would love to see a Mac coaster and what they could do. Because Intamin wasn't on the map either. Intamin, did a few things, and really Millennium Force kind of like did it for him, right? Am I wrong on that? Like, didn't Millennium Force really?
I mean, we had a long run of Intamin crap. And when I say crap, I mean really good crap. I mean, you had Millennium Force, then you had Wicked Twister, you had Top Thrill Dragster, then you got Maverick, and then you have Shoot the Rapids. I mean, Intamin did so much over the course of this past decade.
Yeah.
And then we kind of jumped back on B&M here. We see Gatekeeper. And the year before that, we saw Leviathan within the chain. I mean, I think Intimidator 305, and I think maybe some of the issues they have with that, maybe that might have been the last straw. Because we saw Leviathan, and we saw Gatekeeper. Now we see Banshee. Now we have Fury 325. And we got Rougarou. These are all beamers that are, going into these parks now. And there's still talk that there's a Giga project in the works for Knott's. We don't know when it's coming, but we hear that's still in the books for some point. 2016, 2017. We hear that hasn't been killed yet, from what I've heard. So
well, that one's an old one too.
I don't. Well, and that's, that was originally like a 2012 thing people were talking about, and it's still being talked about, and we still hear that it's not dead. And going off of what you said about who the new company is, another one of my questions is it possible that the Mean Streak RMC thing is just dead for now? I don't know. They're increasing manpower. Maybe they're going to be doing a few extra projects every year. Maybe they'll go up to 3 or 4. Then all of a sudden it's a possibility. And we heard that there's North American projects outside of the Six Flags chain. So maybe Mean Streak isn't too far away. I mean, maybe it's one that they're talking about. Another one that I had that we didn't touch on at all tonight was, do we think Cedar Fair isn't big on flying coasters? They've always, the one that they have that Time Warp up at Canada's Wonderland, which is a sorry excuse for a roller coaster, but that was inherited through Paramount. That wasn't a Cedar Fair thing. Firehawk, that was inherited through Six Flags from when it was Geauga Lake, and it was X-Flight over there. That wasn't a Cedar Fair thing. Cedar Fair I think it was Dick Kinzel who once said he was never a fan of the flying coasters and he never had any plans to do one. Now, me personally, if you know me, I'm a big fan of them. So is WeMet willing to go out on a limb and maybe try for a big one? And I mean, that's a record that's been long-standing with Tatsu. Do you see them try and go somewhere big with that? I don't know.
I find it interesting that there's not a single flying B&M flying coaster in the entire chain. I find that really interesting, that there's not a single one. Yeah. And to be honest with you, I'm perfectly fine with that. I liked Manta, I liked Tatsu, but at the end of the day, I'm not lining up to go ride those things. Like that's not like on my wish list.
See, I am.
I don't like the experience of it. I don't like, it's just it's so different, and I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest with you. I'd rather you invest the money.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know why, but that's you. That's
your number one coaster has always been Raptor too. But anyways. So I don't know. Well, we discussed that a few weeks ago, how we have these weird top coasters. You got Raptor, I got Manta. I mean, nobody else has those as their number ones. Just a few more here. We talked about what kind of flat rides do they have. There's tons of flat rides out there. There's plenty of flat rides they don't have. It's just a matter of what they want to go get. I mean, if you look at Canada's Wonderlands collection, the top scan there called Shockwave, which is from Mondial, is really, really cool. Mondial does some great ones. We know Huss does some. That does a lot of them. I mean, there's lots of options out there. There's not a shortage of flat rides to go. Shows, maybe for their 150th anniversary, they have some sort of special show that goes back on their history, but I don't think they make that a focal point unless they make that a focal point of a 150th anniversary celebration, but I don't think we see anything before that on that front.
It becomes very difficult to put that anywhere since you've knocked down your big theater. It's all the other theaters are very small, very cozy. You have your luminosity stage. I guess you could do something there. I don't know. I just don't see them.
Maybe they replace luminosity for a year.
Well, the other thing is they've always talked about knocking down the aquatic stadium too, the old Dolphin Stadium. Like that's been there, and they got the All Wheels Extreme Show there now, which fits nicely. It's well attended, but it's a huge structure to just have that show that you could pretty much put that show anywhere. And it's just a huge
that on the Midway if you wanted to.
Like seriously, that structure is so huge. And that opens up a huge tract of land too that you talk about a GCI, you knock down the aquatic stadium and you build the same way that I kind of said to before, where you shoot it out towards Planet Snoopy and then down that Midway, and you actually have quite a bit of room there to do something like that then.
Yeah, you could. I mean, we've seen how they put Gold Striker kind of right there on top of a big slab of concrete. So I mean,
build it right around Windseeker, right? Build it right around it.
Hey,
they've done it once.
Why not? They did it once. Why not do it again? And I'll tell you what, it would be it would be cooler to ride Windseeker it's really cool to ride that observation tower at Great America because we did it. It would be even cooler to ride Windseeker. The only downside is you wouldn't be able to take pictures, or you wouldn't be supposed to anyway.
Yeah.
In a closed observation tower you could. What about, do you see anything happening with the resorts? I think with Hotel Breakers getting a refurb, I think the resorts are kind of set for a little bit because that's kind of the one that needed it the most. I think the other resorts are in pretty decent shape right now. Correct me if I've only ever stayed at Hotel Breakers, so correct me if I'm wrong. But
Sandcastle Suites went through a refurb a few years back. I'm talking about 5-7 years ago. It wasn't a huge refurb. But they have modern amenities like flat screen televisions and things like that. Like Hotel Breakers was so far behind with like tube screens and
the 80s.
Oh, and the beds were 25 years old. It was getting bad there for a while.
Decor was just outdated.
Yeah, and that really needed it. But the one thing I should say about the resorts is since they took out the Bon Air section, they lost a whole bunch of rooms there. So they are down on rooms. So maybe down the road, like I said, maybe you build another wing onto the Hotel Breakers, or you put another hotel somewhere. They just redid they took out a lot of the campers places and put more cabins in. So they're obviously added some rooms there. So maybe that's actually a wash with the added rooms over there. I don't know. But yeah, I think you're pretty solid for the most part.
I'm interested to see how the rooms are because we talked about this because my aunt and I on opening weekend in 2013, we had some issues in our room as far as the plumbing goes. And we mentioned, we were really hoping that it's not just cosmetic and we hope that there would be some infrastructure updates as far as that goes. It looks like, obviously they tore apart that entire, hallway, the corridor entering. So it seems like they are doing some major work, so I'm hoping that includes some infrastructure updates to kind of repair some of those issues because I don't want to say it's a common issue, but it's far from very uncommon.
It's a common issue. I've stayed at Hotel Breakers at least once a year since 1993. I can tell you it's a huge issue there that has been getting progressively worse every year. And horror stories, like just absolute things that not even stories. I've experienced them. I've gone through the horror story of walking into a room that the bathroom is completely filled with black mold. That kind of stuff that absolutely happens. That's a huge issue, especially for the price you are paying there. That you're paying $200 to $300 a night for a room. You kind of expect a little bit more than what you get at Hotel Breakers, but hopefully that's all rectified here. And I don't know because I know they gutted the whole main section, but they weren't gutting Breakers East, which was where a lot of the issues were. So it'll be interesting to see if the new coat of paint actually lasts. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. Now the last question that I have here, and maybe this will go into our final thoughts here. We're talking about all this stuff, and I think we covered it, but where's it going to go? I think for the most part we've covered that we think we could find space for like a dark ride or something, and obviously they're making room for a dive coaster or whatever it is they're putting. If you have a Rocky Mountain redo of Mean Streak, then you don't have to worry about space there. But 2020, if they're going to do a really big coaster or something really, really, really big, where's it going to go?
My short answer is for aesthetic reasons, and it's going to be difficult to do. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's going to be obvious, but shooting it down towards the causeway along where the marina parking currently is, aesthetically it would look amazing. If you have an out and back that goes up and down the whole parking lot, aesthetically it would just look fantastic. Cool. Another option would be as you fill in the lagoon and have it go all the way around the lagoon and maybe interact with Millennium a little bit. That would be another. You'd take out Iron Dragon, obviously, if that was the case, and you have a big coaster, right? But then you get issues with luminosity and all that junk. I don't know where it goes, but to sit here and to say that there's no room for something like that, I think is silly. Because I think if Cedar Point, if Cedar Point's proven one thing throughout the years is they find room. People said, well, where would 2 years before Gatekeeper, people would have said, well, where would you put that? Well, they put it right where they put Gatekeepers, where they put it, and
that's essentially an out and back.
Absolutely.
Gatekeeper doesn't take up a big footprint when you think about it. It's just a long sliver.
And Gatekeeper essentially uses land that wasn't being used before. It was parking. So I think the move is that you take away parking, which for most days isn't an issue, but on heavy days it's a huge issue. But you find ways around that then, and you find ways to fix that then.
It's an issue anyway.
And here's another theory that we talked about, the water park becoming part of the admission for the park. What if you took the whole Soak City parking lot and got rid of Challenge Park? Could you imagine putting a coaster back there? You have a ton of space now to do helixes and out and do whatever you want. You'd start it in Frontierland and have it shoot out towards Soak City. So there's places to do it. It just takes creative thinking is what it takes.
Yeah, I think when you look at their current lineup, Let's think about this. Let's run through some of the coasters and think about how little land they take up. Gatekeeper is very long, but it's a little sliver that just happens to work its way around to the front of the park. Wicked Twister, obviously, is a very narrow thing of land. Blue Streak is a very long sliver with a turnaround at one end. Even Raptor itself is pretty much a sliver with one part that kind of juts out. Mm-hmm. Magnum is an out and back, a lot like Gatekeeper, just works its way around and has a little turnaround and a piece of land at the end. Dragster is a nice little sliver of land that's just a big rectangle. I mean, the only rides that really take up a lot of space, you're talking about Mean Streak takes up a lot of space. Yeah. Maverick covers a lot of space. Millennium covers a lot of space.
Millennium covers the most, I'd say. Like, Millennium takes up a huge
Rougarou / Mantis takes up a lot of space. But when you're looking at some of these other ones,
and really, even Rougarou to some extent is like very compact. It's not as compact as like a Six Flags, like an X Flight or something. Like X Flight takes up next to nothing. Goliath takes up next to nothing. But these when you build the biggest, you have to take up a little bit more. But for the most part, they're very conscious about land use there. And getting rid of stuff, and there's there's plenty of room.
Corkscrew goes right over the midway.
And I just think that
Gemini takes up a lot of space.
There's just plenty of options, and that it's going to take creative thinking. It's going to be new. It's going to be different. It's going to change, but you can fit it in there somewhere. You can do it somewhere. And I just don't know where. I've given you some ideas, but I think it's there somewhere. It's like they've never said, oh, well, we're out of space. We can't do any more. Sorry.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, I think my final thoughts for the night are, every year we try our best to try and predict what Cedar Point's going to do, and I think aside from Gatekeeper, I think Gatekeeper was the first time in a long time that we kind of all knew what was going on.
Yeah.
Nobody saw Maverick coming. Nobody saw Dragster coming. Nobody saw Millennium coming. And then before that, it was before we had any idea what was coming until they made an announcement. This day and age, we can get trademarks. We see layouts leak. We see blueprints leak. But, Gatekeeper was really the first time in a while that we really knew what was going on. They always tend to – even Rougarou, there were talks about it, but nobody really knew for sure what was going on.
Yeah.
Until they released that first teaser. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see with another big project now. Will it be like even Banshee, we saw the layout, but we weren't really sure what it was. And then we had that teaser. And up until the announcement day, we had no idea what was going on with Fury. We saw the logo leak, but I think Cedar Fair has kind of been keen. I think they learned from Gatekeeper, said, hey, people are going to find stuff out. We got to come up with a way to kind of throw them off. So it'll be interesting to see if they kind of play with our minds a little bit this coming year, especially with so much supposedly out this early.
If they give me enough, I got Fury. I nailed Fury on the head. The only thing I didn't know was the name. That was the only thing I didn't know was the Fury 325 name. And it really should have been the easiest piece. But everything else, I got your bees, I got your hornets, I got everything.
Yeah. Hey, maybe Centurion is a name they use for a dive coaster.
I guess. I don't know.
I don't know.
I didn't like it last year.
I think we got to revisit. I think we got to revisit this topic in the summer at some point, shortly before we get an announcement, and maybe we have some more ideas of what might be coming.
I was told not to miss Winter Chill Out this year, so I'm expecting a little bit of something come February. And if really they're building something that requires all this land to be taken care of so early, maybe we'll just get an announcement real early too. Maybe we get an announcement in February. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, don't get your hopes up.
Yeah, I won't. Trust me, I won't. Oh well.
Hey, maybe Cedar Point will make a 2016 announcement before Busch Gardens makes a 2015 announcement.
Oh, wouldn't that be something? That was
I heard that's not coming until March.
Yeah,
I heard that's not coming until March, and Winter Chill Out's in February. So you at the end of February. So that's. Wouldn't that be great?
Something? That'd be awesome. Well, I think my final thought for the evening is I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens. I've worked myself up over this for over a year now, and I'm just really. There I am. I'm just really excited about what's going to happen, and we're going to have to do this show next year too. I think once we figure out everything.
This is always fun to speculate on the future and stuff, isn't it?
We can cross that out, and now we can see where the plan moves.
Right, and then we can refine our completely wrong predictions again in the summer and the next year and the year after.
For sure. Well, as always, thank you for joining us here at COASTER-net Uncut.
Yes,
thank you for chiming in. Thank you for sending in your responses. And as always, if there was ever a fitting episode for this one, it's this one. As always, right on, Ride Warriors.
See you next time.